Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hussein Al-Mahmoudi, Chief Executive Officer of the Sharjah Research and Technology Park. On behalf of SRTIP, I would like to welcome you all into the second edition of the Women in Technology Conference. We have concluded last year our first edition with a great success and excitement from all speakers and attendees. Since then, we have been through very tough time due to the COVID-19. This pandemic affected every economy, every country around the world. But despite the difficulties that we've been through in 2019 and 2020, we are confident together we will make it. This conference is really a timely conference. We had hoped that we will be hosting you here in Sharjah at SRTIP Park this year. Unfortunately, due to safety and regulation, we had to confine this conference to only an online version of it. So despite our, I have to say, disappointment, we are still very excited to host this online version of this Women in Technology Conference. And this year, we will discuss many topics, many important topics that reflect our current climate and our current challenging environment. We will talk about the role of leadership in this uncertain time, and the need for collaboration and the need for cooperation between our countries and between our organizations to move things forward. We will also discuss innovation and how can we innovate our products and how can we innovate our companies and the way that we work. It is an uncertain time and we all have to revisit our working style and our collaboration. We will also talk about science, and with this note, we are very proud here in the UAE to have our Minister of Space, which was in charge of the Hope mission to Mars, to be a female, Her Excellency Sarah Al-Amiri, which we are very proud also that she will deliver a keynote speech during this year edition. Women in technology, women in business, women in government are progressing day by day. And this is a great news for us. We recently know that the new Director General for the World Trade Organization has been appointed as a female. And on behalf of you and us, we would like to congratulate her in this exciting journey and wish her all the best. Another excitement news for us is to have the female, or the first Arab female, Her Highness Sheikh Abdur Al-Qasimi, to be appointed as the President of the International Publication Association. Her Highness happens to be also from Sharjah. So we are very excited and that we are going through an exciting time, that we see more female playing a bigger role in the world of business, technology, and innovation. Here at SRTIP, we are committed to develop more programs to support female entrepreneurs, female scientists, and female innovators. We have launched many special programs to promote their work and make sure that they succeed. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, this is a very difficult time, and only together we will make it. And this year, we have gathering from all over the world. We have speakers from the 5 continents in the world, from America, South America, Europe, Asia, the Middle East. And we're very excited that we have all these brains and talents with us in this edition. As I said, we will discuss key topics. I'm really hoping that out of this edition, we will together develop a roadmap of how can we take this exciting theme of women in technology forward, and how collectively we can contribute to our economies and the well-being of our neighbors, colleagues, families, and businesses. Together, we will prevail. Together, we will beat this pandemic, and together, we will progress and achieve our sustainable development goals. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best and good luck with this edition of the Women in Technology Conference hosted at the Sharjah Research and Technology Park. Thank you.
Women are tech's most untapped resource. Not only is creating diverse teams ethical and will drive more economic growth, but future-proofing the job opportunities of women will ensure sustainable communities worldwide. Women in Tech is committed to actively promoting girls' and women's empowerment in STEM. We are present in 6 continents with thousands of members. Our power as a global movement is demonstrated by working magic every day. We create impact through action to build skills and confidence, setting women up for success. Our mission is to empower 5 million women and girls by 2030. Because when women rise, we all rise.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to the second edition of the Women in Technology Global Forum. And thank you so much for being here today. I was very much looking forward to welcome you all in person here in the Sharjah Research, Technology and Innovation Park, but due to the latest event restrictions, we are having to go to a full digital event. My deepest gratitude goes to His Excellency Hussein Al-Mahmoudi, CEO of the Sharjah Research Technology Innovation Park, for organizing this event with us and for his continuous support towards Women in Tech as partner and also as advisory board member of our global organization. Women in Tech is committed to actively promoting girls and women's empowerment around the world with a focus on Sustainable Development 5B, harnessing technologies. Our goal is to empower 5 million women and girls with the skills and confidence to succeed in STEM careers by 2030. Our mission is to provide practical, step-by-step assistance, setting women up for success. This past year has been one of the most turbulent times in the history of the modern world. The pandemic has accelerated the digital transition. Millions of women around the world are worried about the future of their jobs, their workplaces, their families, and their businesses. They see that their studies, their jobs, and their workplaces are changing very rapidly. And women of all ages have to learn new technologies or new ways of doing old things. And our resilience and power as a global community is demonstrated by working magic every day with very limited resources. In 2020, we have gained some 30,000 members, bringing our community to over 50,000 people present in 6 continents. Growth in membership is not an achievement by itself, but also an indication of the dynamism of our organization.
Women are tech's most untapped resource. Not only is creating diverse teams ethical and will drive more economic growth, but future-proofing the job opportunities of women will ensure sustainable communities worldwide. Women in Tech is committed to actively promoting girls' and women's empowerment in STEM. We are present in 6 continents with thousands of members. Our power as a global movement is demonstrated by working magic every day. We create impact through action to build skills and confidence, setting women up for success. Our mission is to empower 5 million women and girls by 2030. Because when women rise, we all rise.
For me, one of the highlights of 2020 was being able to provide 150 students from Ladies College in New Delhi with laptops. Last December, we launched a campaign to buy computers to support students of the LSR College of Women following the tragic death of Aishwarya, a bright young girl who took her life because she was under tremendous stress for not having a computer to work from at home. And in just a few days, thanks to our communities and partners' overwhelming response, we were able to deliver all the computers before the beginning of the exams. Thank you so much to the power ladies behind this project that worked hand in hand with us. That was Vinita Sethi, Devika Kambo and Suki Laya for leading this crucial work of identifying and equipping the students that are suffering from the digital divide. You see, I believe that supporting girls, especially during their teenage years, is really critical to ensuring that they pursue STEM education. Women in Tech has programs for every stage of a woman's career life cycle, from the classroom all the way to the boardroom. If it's true what the saying says, that you can't be what you can't see, we are here today to give this stage to exceptional women who are doing incredible role models that will inspire, I am certain, all of us to reach out to our full potential. So I look forward to working hand in hand with the Sharjah Research Technology and Innovation Park, making our UAE chapter one of the driving forces for women in innovation in the whole of the region, empowering positive action and driving meaningful change. Because when women rise, we all rise. Thank you.
فنحن لا نعرف اليأس ولا المستحيل، فلهذا كان الاختيار على الاسم مسبار الأمل.
The UAE government wanted to inspire Emirati youth to go into STEM and wanted to create a disruptive change in the mindset when it comes to science and technology. On top of that, it wanted to use the mission as a catalyst for development within different sectors that would serve the creation of a competitive, creative, and innovative knowledge-based economy. So it's about the future of the UAE. عشرة 9 8 7 6 5 4 3 2 1 اطلاق.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, thank you for joining us for the second and the very first hybrid Women in Technology Global Forum from Sharjah. Over the coming days, more than a dozen online and in-person sessions and panels have been set up to seek answers to a question that will shape the way we live and work in the years ahead. Simply put, how can women lay the foundations for a better, stronger world as we rebuild from the global health, social, and economic crises that have fundamentally changed our lives? I will not begin to suggest that this welcome note provides the answers, but what I hope to do is outline what we are facing when it comes to encouraging more girls and women to take up roles and responsibilities in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We do live in an age predicated on science and technology. We have harnessed the scientific method to create formidable technological powers, and we've used science and technology to address this pandemic that we're living through today. Now, as we head into the decades of action, science and technology is propelling us forward at an ever-accelerating rate. This is especially so when we consider the digital shift affected by the coronavirus pandemic, how it has condensed up to 10 years of technological development into just 18 months, and this is only conservative estimates. Humanity's ability to adapt has once again been an astounding and reassuring thing to witness. But as the Women in Technology Global Forum will highlight over the next 2 days, we must make sure that our adaptation to the new normal is considered inclusive and progressive for all. We live in new times, that's for sure, but we must ensure that these new times exist for all, men and women, people from diverse backgrounds, people from so many different walks of life, because it's through diversity that science and technology prospers. We used to consider it a threat to our way of life that we are creating a world presided over by science and technology, in which no one truly understood the power and potential of that science and technology. We felt that this combination of unrealized power could backfire. But we see today the outcomes of utilizing science and technology in our daily lives. Be it known to us or unknown to us. We continued in an age of pandemic, utilizing technology as the foundations of development. We could unwittingly remove the human from humanity in our ceaseless pursuit of new technologies that did what we could do, but better, faster, and more efficiently. However, as new knowledge sharing platforms and education programs have emerged, this perceived threat has been greatly allied today. Scientists and technologists better understand what they are creating and why we are creating it each day. The danger today is driving science and technology, but leaving people behind, and driving science and technological advancements without being inclusive from people from different genders and also from different backgrounds. Women today comprise more than half of the Earth's population. Yet globally, we are underrepresented in the STEM fields. This is not the case in the Emirates, where we are approaching gender parity in graduates from the STEM fields. What this means is that there is a way to be more inclusive in science, and there is a need for us to be more inclusive in science, technology, and engineering. I myself, when working on the Emirates Mars mission, had a science team that comprised of 80% women. This was not a target that we set for ourselves, but this was part of our recruitment process, to be blind to gender and background, and to only look at talent and those that would surely drive development forward. Our Mars mission is also 34% women, which became normal for us within the team because the recruitment process was focused on talent. We need to remove inherent biases that comes into recruitment, and we need to further alleviate a lot of the challenges that are faced in getting women to leadership roles in various areas. I'm grateful to the UAE's leadership and government for establishing portfolios on both science and technology, and ensuring that women are empowered across the board to ensure that this moves forward with the right diversity in mind.
Hello everyone, I'm Fatma Al-Mheri and welcome to the second edition of the Women in Technology Global Forum. We had hoped to welcome everyone in person, and we made an effort to keep the forum hybrid. But unfortunately, due to event restrictions in Sharjah, we have had to move this forum 100% online. However, this fact will not compromise the effectivity nor the quality of this forum, and we hope to be back in hybrid manner next year. This past year has been one of the most turbulent times in history of the modern world. Globally, we have faced very challenging times, and when faced with exceptional events, leaders need to take a hard look at their tools, strategies, and their visions. This opening panel will discuss how to manage business uncertainty, because this pandemic has affected our jobs, our workplace, our family, and other dynamics. Not only have the problems changed, but the way in which the problems are addressed has changed as well. Our panel speakers today are Her Excellency Sheikh Ibn Al-Qasimi, former Minister of the UAE, Dr. Manhal Thabit, founder and president of Smart Tips Consultants, Najla Al-Midfa', CEO at Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, Her Excellency Sheikha Hind Al-Qasimi, chairperson of the Sharjah Women Business Council, and this panel will be moderated by Maysoon Azzam, who is a presenter at Al Arabiya News. We hope you benefit from the information to be discussed and the experiences of our speakers in this panel. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Highnesses and Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in the opening session of the second edition of Women in Tech Global Forum. This session is entitled Managing Business Uncertainty from a Women in Tech Perspective. As we all know, change in business is a constant. However, we cannot ignore the fact that the changes that we have been facing for the past year are unprecedented. The pandemic has had an adverse impact on our lives in general and, of course, business in particular. And this requires leaders to take a hard look at their strategies and vision in order to help transform current challenges into new opportunities. In this session, we'll try to understand the types of certainty businesses are facing. We are here to deal with areas where there has been a disproportionate impact on women in comparison to men, and finally try to establish mechanisms needed to redress the imbalance. Allow me first to introduce my distinguished panelists. Her Excellency Sheikha Lubna bint Khalid Al-Qasimi, former minister in the government of the United Arab Emirates. Actually, Sheikha Lubna holds the distinction of being the first Emirati woman to assume a ministerial post in 2004. Her Excellency Sheikha Hind bin Majid Al-Qasimi, chairperson of Sharjah Business Women Council. Please note that during the session we'll be using the acronym SBWC for Sharjah Business Women Council, as it's going to be repeated several times. Dr. Manahil Thabit is ranked among the top 30 smartest people alive by Super Scholar. She's a member of the Royal Society and the president of the Economic Forum for Sustainable Development. And last but not least, Ms. Najla Al-Madfa, CEO at Sharjah Entrepreneurship Center, Shira. Welcome, and allow me to start my questions with Sheikha Lubna. Sheikha Lubna, what does uncertainty mean in business? And is there a disproportionate level of uncertainty between female-led businesses and male-led businesses?
Well, let me see. I think with this pandemic, it's like a curveball that hit everyone worldwide. It was borderless. It was something new that whether it's government entities, private sector, reacting to it had taken different levels from different countries, different businesses. I personally would not say that it actually had impacted women business more than others. I think we are better to look at it, whether these are corporate organization, impact versus small businesses and businesses online. Women, however, found themselves taking more responsibilities because now they're at home and they're being forced to homeschooling their children. So that in itself, I would think, is probably where they bear the burden. It is automatically assumed that it's the women or the mothers who would look after the kids when it comes to homeschooling. But in general,
in Gulf countries, sorry, Sheikha Lubna, in Gulf countries, at least we have some kind of a child caring system at home with the services provided at least.
Yes, but I still think this mechanism for some schools, maybe private schools, certain parents, they were able to afford this, but there were a lot of cases where women did not have the right setup at home for their children. You're talking about a full setup of laptops, screens, kids, private rooms, sometimes multiple, if you have 4 kids, for example. So it was a bigger challenge, I think, and that's really where the most strain, in my belief, that had been on society. Having said that, I think women are resilient. Women can manage themselves, they can turn around things, they can adapt, they can adopt. But women who had business online were the women who probably had survived better. Women who had opportunities to start up online applications, creating apps for others, actually managed well. It's strange enough, and I was commenting on this yesterday when I was talking to you, Maysoon, that I've burned more of my credit card now during COVID than ever because everything shifted online, and we found ourselves that we have nothing else to do. So you go on buying. It's women who had small businesses through Instagram and others were women who actually did very well.
This is the positive side of Corona when we talk about them. But Sheikh Lubna, you represent the face of women's empowerment. Do you feel that the pandemic erased at least partially decades of efforts for women's empowerment or not? Partially, at least.
It's very hard for me to actually sort of divide this as men versus women, or to me, this pandemic has been very hard on everyone, and the uncertainty of it just keep growing. Most of us thought by the turn of 2021 that we will be better off. Maybe it was like a false optimism that we felt that we really wanted things to change. It's not looking that way, and doesn't matter where the businesses are, but the critical path, I think, is the government. If the governments were ready and the governments had the right infrastructure early on, regardless, was not set up for COVID-19, these are the countries that moved forward. And the other part too is countries who had better health system. It was very interesting. In 2020, countries were not measured by the economic growth. They were measured more by their readiness through their health system. The countries that went through chaotic ramification of COVID were the countries that really had not established a proper health infrastructure in terms of care, mobilizing themselves into setting up special camps and mobility of access to vaccine. And
Europe was a surprise, Sheikh Lubna, especially Italy and Spain, what happened regarding the health sector. Sheikh Hind, with regard to the uncertainty arising from the pandemic, how easy was it for UAE women and SPWC members to adapt and also respond?
Thank you, Ms. Maysoon, and thank you for having me here with the lovely ladies. For the uncertainty, as you said, the pandemic impact, I believe, small and big businesses. And how did SPWC reacted? We had a challenge to virtualize all our services so we can support our members. So we had to connect with our members. We had to come up with initiatives, which is virtuals, for example, to know their challenges, what's happening, and how can we support them. So we had to, as I said, we had to create virtual initiatives so we can communicate with our members and we can hear their challenges. And they had challenges, for example, the safety restriction with their team and the safety between their colleagues. I believe the pandemic had maybe, can I say, raise different challenges between them, and how can we support them in this pandemic?
That's really interesting. Dr. Manahel, Digital Utopia, an article, very interesting article, to be frank with you, and research you have carried out. Could you reflect on the impact of digital world during the time of uncertainty?
Okay. First of all, thank you for hosting me, actually. And I'm really glad and honored to be with such distinguished personality and to share my little bit of my thoughts about what I know least about what's happening right now. Talking about the digital utopia. I mean, the world we know has long been understood by philosophers, and many have developed ideas that are utopian. Ideas like the vision of our societies and even how the world should be. But in the modern world, these visions have an economic essence to them, or an economic coverage, with both good, bad, and seemingly it's inevitable. To clarify the utopian features of the digital world, it's reflected in a few points, which are the practices, initiatives, and activities in all areas, with the specific aim for society, scientific, and humanitarian or ethical society. Of course, this will be realized through the dissemination of contribution that benefits and promotes society. However, the effectiveness of the digital world is only a reflection of reality, as we know. It's also part of the social, political, and economic life. But to my understanding, the rapidity of change and the uncertainty involved the impure, the innocent, and the criminal. We've all been witnessing the exposure that we have been exposed to in terms of privacy. And Sheikh Lubna gave us an example of somebody vandalizing a meeting over Zoom. This is all coming to a format that the uncertainty is becoming the certainty that we know right now. But unifying of society, our society is less prone to differentiated levels, not likely in the digital world, but it remains a utopia at the end, something that we dream about, yet not realized in the real world, only some digitalized reflection. What I meant by that article is that reaching a safe zone socially or in society with the full exposure of what's going on, having us as Arabs from very conservative societies, so very open platforms, is becoming our norm and our life. This transition was not taken as it should be, and the exposure to this transition will have huge impact on the society and eventually on every other aspect of it.
Thank you, Dr. Manahel. Ms. Najla, we need to talk about startups and what are the uncertainties they face, and how do entrepreneurs deal with uncertainty, and what lessons can we learn from them?
Thank you, Maysoon, and it's a pleasure to be here. I was on this panel with Sheikh Lubna last year, and it's crazy to think how much the world has changed in that 1 year. We were at the Sheikh Jawahar Hall, and hopefully we'll be able to get back to that normal soon now that vaccines have started. But in terms of uncertainty, when it comes to startups, uncertainty is par for the course. I think with every uncertainty, every uncertainty and challenge, startups also see opportunity, and they see innovation and an opportunity for creativity. So no startup begins its journey without completely embracing change and uncertainty. But I guess there are two types of uncertainties that startups face. One uncertainty, which to some extent they can control, which is I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it will work. And so there's a process that they go through when they have an idea or when they're building their product in terms of how to manage that uncertainty so that they don't go to market with a full-fledged product and then have actually no data and no information on it. So the way they work, and typically it's what we call the lean startup approach, is initially validate all your assumptions. So as bigger companies, we're very used to doing deep strategies and business plans and so on. We learn by kind of writing and by theory, but startups learn by doing. They validate their assumptions. They go out there, they survey potential customers, they talk to customers, they build an MVP, what we call a minimum viable product. Rather than building a full product, just build the minimum product with the minimum features, put it out there, try, build, learn what works, what doesn't work, and iterate and keep running basically fast and cheap experiments. And that's what allows them to deal with the uncertainty around their idea, around the product, and around the market. So internally,
in normal times, right?
And even during other, let's say, abnormal times, that's still the process that we encourage them to go through, which is experiment. We say fail fast, fail cheap. Don't go and spend $1 million only to learn later on that, oh, this wasn't the right idea. So start small, run experiments and learn. But that's the internal side of things. But externally, there are obviously dislocations, right? There's economic dislocations like the financial crisis that happened. There can be geopolitical situations. And the most recent example of an external event is obviously the pandemic. And the question is, how do startups react in situations like those? In our case, for example, we had startups that were both negatively impacted by the pandemic and startups that were positively impacted by the pandemic. As Sheikh Lubna said, there were startups in certain industries, let's say edtech startups, who actually, or even let's say these grocery apps. We've got a few startups in our portfolio that kind of do groceries. They had a huge uptick in demand. And how do they actually scale their business all of a sudden to meet this huge demand? And at the same time, we had other startups who lost all their contracts and literally had no customers. And in both cases, I think if you look at what the bottom line in terms of how they managed that uncertainty is that they were both quick to adapt and made decisions really quickly. So if they were negatively impacted, they managed their cash flow really quickly. They let go of their staff really quickly and started using more freelancers. They pivoted their business models and tried to look for other opportunities in maybe other industries or other opportunities that may have come up as a result of the pandemic. And those that were positively impacted learned how to quickly fundraise, how to quickly scale their operations and be able to meet that demand that they were receiving. And so I think that there are lessons there as well for us as, let's say, government entities, for bigger corporations. There's a famous saying that those who survive are not the fittest or the strongest or the most intelligent, but those who are able to adapt to change. And I think every startup's genuinely their biggest, let's say, forte is the fact that they are nimble, they are able to adapt to change. They make change with agility and speed. When we come to decision making, often we have rigid decision making processes and we're very complacent. I mean, you look at companies like Kodak, and one of the reasons that they failed is just that they were very slow to react to the digital camera market. So I think that ability to move and move fast is what we can learn from entrepreneurs, and to never be afraid of change, but to actually see some opportunities in it. Some of the biggest startups that we know, they're no longer startups, but companies like Netflix, companies like Uber, companies like Dropbox, all were the result of an economic dislocation. They all were born during the last financial crisis in 2008 to 2010. And so I think one of the core philosophies of entrepreneurship is to see opportunity in uncertainty.
Yeah, and as you said, we need to adapt, but still we need support in different kinds. Sheikh Lubna, who's to lead the way in paving the road to overcoming this uncertainty? Is it the women? Is it women in general, the whole sector, the community, the government?
I would say government, number one. Societies that survived and moved forward were the societies that had very strong decision making within the government. For example, UAE actually had passed more than 50% in terms of its vaccination plan right now. So one way toward recovery is you start to immunize the society with vaccines. You also set the regulations for them. So I remember early on, I don't know if any of you remember having a sanitization program that went in not only building, but roads. There were curfews. There were regulation in terms of social distancing. So the government was quite alert. They immediately moved into emergency committees, and these committees were making decisions, looking at results, and then mobilizing new decisions that they have. So I think setting up the rules, same, saving more infection areas by homeschooling, for example, shutting down schools, creating limited numbers of access in terms of any place where it has retailing, malls, for example. So the government is actually the lead. Having said that, I think the government should establish that. And this is where we see now crises happening in countries in Europe and the US versus countries like the UAE, Israel, and some of the others who had actually led the way in terms of vaccination strategies, and in terms of New Zealand, for example, is an excellent example for that right from the beginning. But in the same time, if you have irresponsible society, then it really doesn't work. People, citizens within the society, is mandated that they have responsibilities as well. We have seen spikes in terms of pandemic here in the UAE. Part of it is for having some people who are irresponsible. So we, in this, as we say, we're all in it together, not just within a country, but worldwide, even when you cross borders with travel or anything else. And it changes in terms of status. Today you are safe, tomorrow a new strain comes in, and all of a sudden you take a dip, and then you start to float again. So in general, government is number one priority, but I would put it on community at all level. Not just women, or we have to take responsibilities of adhering to regulations and policies within the government, but at the same time, taking our own precautions at home. I stopped seeing my mother for a bit of weeks now, and I had called her, so it's all on phone. For the reason is for her protection, but that becomes very hard on the elderly as well as on us. So in this, it's a tough time, but we can only move forward if we all work together on this.
And to be frank with you, I live in the UAE, and I really thank the government for all the efforts that it has been doing till now, actually. And the way we entered the pandemic was very slow because of the efforts they were doing and the way they campaigned to protect us. Sheikha Hind, Sheikha Lubna highlighted the main efforts that the UAE has been doing since the beginning of the pandemic. What about the Sharjah government? And maybe we can talk about the initiatives launched by SPWC and other entities to support and increase women's participation in the economy.
As you said, we're trying to provide the tools and knowledge for our members. We came up with the initiatives. We want to show them how to manage the pandemic. We came up with the different workshops which they needed, how to transfer to the e-commerce, how to have a business plan, a financial plan. And this was from our workshops. And we had the SPWC tours to hear from our members what are the challenges they're passing through, so we can support them and navigate their challenges. We came up with SPWC talks. We connect members together so we can hear their challenges and to support each other, because I believe this is how our members could hear from others how they're managing their crisis, in their business. So for example, some of the FMBs had to support each other to share knowledge, how to transfer to e-commerce, online payment. So this is how we try to support them through knowledge and tools, through workshops, talks, virtual tours, and I believe that the knowledge is the lake of knowledge. It's gonna, the lake of resources and knowledge. It's not about how to financially support them. It's if they know how to react in their businesses.
To adapt. And
exactly.
maybe this is the main headline.
This is the main thing. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Manahel, I want to refer to another article, The Great Reset, and here we are touching the same point about adapting to the new transformation. Could you please highlight the various stages of the new transformation that we have been facing since the beginning of the pandemic and will continue to face, it seems, in the future? And who's to survive? Is it the one who would be able to adapt, or the strongest, or what?
Excellent. Great question. It has long been said that necessity breeds invention, but now necessity breeds adoption in this modern world. So the world is changing, and it's changing really fast, Maysoon. The Great Reset is an article, and it's a research has been written by me at the beginning of the crisis. It's fundamentally important to reset, to avoid the collapse, or at least not to fail to achieve what you really want to achieve. Giving the first aspect, the process, fast technological change, and our associated fast knowledge change. So technology change and knowledge change go hand in hand. The increased knowledge and the increased importance that makes the technological change inevitable. We must also be aware that potentially everything will change, including businesses and other systems. So to harmonize the knowledge with technology, this is a second phase. It's an epiphany. So fundamental steps towards harmonizing knowledge and technology have been accelerated during this crisis. So the coronavirus crisis has merely highlighted and made more urgent the need to adapt, actually. It's been an accelerator. Like other crises during our existence on this planet, necessity has come to the fore. The next phase of the global impact, because there will be no more need for a specific place to do many things. The new transformation will be people across the globe can compete because there is no restrictions of geographical boundaries. Mechanisms will become supra-geographical. So it will become a necessity of survival, actually, that will push us all to reset our lives continuously and radically. I've read an article about Food 2.0 that talks about meat without cows and eggs without chickens. So this kind of transformation needs adaptation. It sounds like science fiction, but who thinks that all this transformation will happen in 1 year? 1 year, we've seen things that we couldn't have even imagined that will happen in a decade. So this is my views about this point.
That's really nice. And Ms. Najla, you mentioned lots of reactions to the situation, catastrophic situation that we're living in, and they were mostly positive in a way. Many of them accelerated in their businesses, but what about who's behind them and the need, what they need actually? How can government entities help startups with their resilience, which is very important, which is needed everywhere, I believe, in all businesses? And what was Shiraa's approach?
Sure. Thanks, Maysoon. I agree with what Sheikh Lubna said. The government has a really important role to play. And I don't know why, but for some reason, there is a general perception that the government is just a passive actor. But actually, it's a very important stakeholder. Where, as Sheikh Lubna said, we're all in it together. We can make this work if we all step up. And that was one of the first things that we realized as Shiraa, as soon as the pandemic hit. We knew this was one of those times when we were being called to action. This was not a time for us to say, oh, well, we're all working from home, so we're going to shut down and we'll see you in a year. This is when we needed to actually step up our support. So obviously, like Sheikh Hind said, we transferred a lot of our services online. We were actually in the middle of one of our programs, our accelerator program, when the pandemic hit. So we quickly transferred that online. We set up a Slack channel for startups to basically talk to each other and support each other. And so we had about 200 or 250 members join that Slack channel, which is still active today. But more importantly, we set up a $1 million fund to support startups because, as we talked about, there were startups that were actually doing well prior to the pandemic, but negatively impacted because of the pandemic. And we wanted to be able to support them with some cash grants to be able to help them extend their runways. What we weren't doing was supporting startups that were already not doing well prior to the pandemic and then giving cash grants. We were only supporting those who were negatively or disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. And so we ended up in partnership with Crescent, supporting 11 startups, 11 of our startups through cash grants. But one of the most important things that we also believe in Shiraa, it's not enough to just help startups through cash. It's also important to help them get customers. And one of the things that we also used the fund for is to actually help them get contracts and help plug them into local and global or regional, let's say, supply chains. And so helping them procure from ourselves, helping them procure from other big companies in Sharjah and across the region was also part of that fund. And then finally, the other part, and I think this is, again, a key learning of the pandemic, is that we, as a human race, are so interdependent and interconnected. And so we ran a competition called basically UCAN in partnership with the Ubuntu Foundation. And we focused on two tracks that are obviously now we know are key to national resilience, one being healthcare and one being food security. These were obviously two industries that were severely shed light on with the pandemic. And we call the two tracks Heal the World and Feed the World. And we opened it up to startups across the MENA region. Actually, it was MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa. And we had winners from various countries, from South Africa, from Kenya, from Egypt, from Jordan, who were coming up with solutions in both these different tracks to basically help us.
Can you give us the examples? Or
yeah, sure, more than happy to. In Kenya, for example, there's two ladies working on a startup called Flare, which is an emergency response system. This is something that maybe we in countries like the UAE don't need to worry about. We know that you can dial any 3-digit number, whether it's 911 or 999, and you can get an ambulance really quickly. In Kenya, it used to take 3 hours to actually wait for, you have someone who's in an emergency or critical situation, and it used to, because it was mainly private operators, it used to take 3 hours to basically find an ambulance. So they've come up with a system that actually brought that time down to less than 17 minutes, and they continue to work on that. That's one. We have one called Cup in Egypt, which actually uses used coffee beans. So the remainder of the coffee beans to actually as a soil to grow mushrooms. So again, just more in terms of sustainability, we have a company called Carers in Jordan, which actually helps connect, let's say, medical help to those who need it at home. So obviously we talk about the elderly or the young, and often they need full-time care at home. But often, let's say you need someone to care for your parents. It's really hard. Where do you find someone that you trust, who is qualified, who you can leave your parents or your children with? And so Carers is basically building that marketplace, if you like, to connect homes with that full-time care help. Those are just examples of some of the companies that we've supported through the $1 million fund, and the support continues even post that. But yeah, I do think the government has an important role to play. One of the things, though, that I'm really, really proud to say is that it wasn't just us as the government. As soon as we announced our $1 million fund, and this is literally what happened, I was on a radio interview and we announced the $1 million fund, and that same afternoon I got a call from the Motivate Media Group, who obviously own a lot of important media outlets and publications here in the UAE. And they said, we want to match your support for entrepreneurs. We're willing to inject 1 million dirhams worth of advertising and PR support for any of your startups that need it. And so, and the same happened with Crescent Enterprises, obviously, who also stepped up and gave grants. And so it was really heartening to see that, again, coming back to what Sheikh Lubna said, everybody stepped up and worked together to really support these startups. And I think that's what made all the difference.
And this is the positive side of Corona. Despite it was a challenge for business, it's also said to be a good opportunity for businesses also to transform and collaborate also. Sheikh Lubna, do you agree?
It's interesting. I think when it comes to support for communities, despite the social distancing, physical social distancing, somehow we ended up being closer. And the morals and the ethics were tested, but yet it really proved that we as human beings do rise up for support. It doesn't matter who you are. And I say this is when you go to the malls, for example, you'll find a lot of volunteers who help people support the social distancing, the wearing of the mask. They'll come to you and they say, your mask is down, please. And I tend to do that when I speak on the phone. I pull it down. And that in itself, it is something that's in front of us, but we really don't see it. We don't observe it. But in general, I do believe, as Najla rightly said, this is a time where we are tested in terms of community as humans, and what we can do, how we can help. The UAE actually had helped a great deal with dispatching a lot of vaccines to so many countries, where our countries have no access, some have, and you see a lot of countries right now lining up people, taking elderly as a priority. UAE really did not waste any time. They equally help people here and abroad as well. So,
but this is part of the culture, Sheikha Lubna. We can also highlight the point that even competitors in such a situation work together. I'll give just one example, like Apple and Google. They work together, although they're competitors, and still ended up with one application, the tracing application.
Yes, that's why I believe COVID came also to test us as human beings. It tested our morals, our ethics, our values as human beings. And I feel happy that at least it really came out. It gave us good results, comforting results that way.
Not only on business level, also political level. Do you think so? Can you give us examples?
No, I think reaching out to countries for support when it comes to vaccination programs and things like that in itself, I think, is a testimony to societies that believe in the whole of the world rather than yourself. But usually people in crisis, sometimes they tend to just think inward, and you're scrambling to find solutions for your community. But to be able to see the whole world from a different perspective while you're working in your societies, that you still do not forget about the others.
That's true. Sheikha Hind, could you share some of your words of wisdom to the young Emirati and expat women entrepreneurs looking to succeed in technology and innovation? Can you unmute, Sheikha?
Okay. We have learned from our leadership that every crisis will come up with opportunity. So I can say for every Emirati and every expat here, this is the time to have to grow and have new business. There's a lot of opportunities and varieties in the industry. For example, agriculture. Like I believe the UAE government are into the agriculture and tech. Tech and agriculture, they're working together right now. There's the hydro-tech happening right now, and we're working on it as SPWC, how we can share the knowledge with our members and who's interested to have tech and agriculture as new businesses in their field. So I believe this is the time, and we are here to support them as a government or
is it an
organization level. As invitation, yes, we are
on this platform
on agriculture and tech. To be honest, there is a program we're going to run soon to give them the knowledge and see how many members or how many women are interested in agriculture and tech, and then. Yes, we do have a plan for that, and we are here to support them, as I said, as a government and organization level, and help them through this journey. So I say just take the opportunity.
Yeah, I wish I can do that. I'm more into media than tech or even agriculture. But Dr. Manahil, as an expert in the knowledge-based economy, what should be the priority to facilitate the transformation into the digital economy?
Okay. Well, before priorities, we should talk about the phases for this transformation, the digital transformation. So the phases are quite complicated and deep, and should go into parallel to different fields. Transformation phases goes into adaptation, climatization, incubation, acceleration, normalization, and implementation. Let me clarify 2 points, which is the climatization and the normalization. Climatization, which is setting the ambience of this transition or the the transition to the knowledge-based economy or to the digitalized economy, shifting from the conventional economy to the non-conventional economy has its own rewired process and procedure. So climatizing the platforms, different platforms, rules and regulations are crucially important for this transformation. The other point, which is normalization. I mean, some of the governments are not accepting some of the digital economy transformation. One of which, an edgy topic, the cryptocurrencies. It's literally not being a topic that governments try to tackle in order to facilitate the transformation to the digital economy. Now,
we talk about that, Dr. Manahel.
Because the lack of control. I mean, talking about the digital economy, cryptocurrencies is different than digital currencies or encrypted currencies. The cryptocurrencies is allowing peer-to-peer dealing without an intermediate financial supervision or financial observation. And this is have been a nightmare for central banks to deal with such kind of transaction, because some of these transactions could go for bad things, or some kind of terrorist uses or some criminal uses. But looking into regularizing and normalizing the fact that government should actually be open to regulate and create more governance into such a transformation is crucially important. And if we talk about the priorities, knowledge will become priority. Knowledge will become a commodity, and the new skill sets will be focused on digitalizing the economy. So everything around the economy, including the knowledge, will be.
Are we ready? And do we have this knowledge available?
Well, who are we? If we talk about the Arab world, then we have long way to go. We need to think about knowledge as a product, as a commodity. We need to be producing knowledge. I mean, in terms of intellectual property rights, in terms of patents. This is an economy. It's becoming an economy. Application and selling applications, and even online games is becoming an economy. The conventional economy is going on, but the non-conventional economy, different platforms with no rules, no regulation, no compliance, no governance, has been also been rising. So having said that, the education system will become more digitalized and focus more on the digital world. So the digital world is capable of rapid adaptation, I would say, which will be vital to knowledge terms. So the conventional education, the way we know it, will have to change. So people will adapt their knowledge to be more digitalized and more freely to be adaptable to changes under any circumstances.
And when we talk about people, we're talking about women and men. Sheikha Lubna at the beginning said that she doesn't really believe in that there's a disproportionate between or disproportionate level of uncertainty between men and women or challenges, despite the fact that she touched the child care issue for women at home. Ms. Najla, do you agree with Sheikha Lubna about that? And what were the challenges specific to women during the pandemic? Were there any specific for women? And how did women create opportunities for themselves?
Yeah, I think Sheikha Lubna touched on the biggest challenge for women has been the fact that, once we moved to working from home and homeschooling, ultimately, and of course, this is not a situation that is new to the pandemic. The division of labor between a man and a woman is still something that we need to obviously discuss. It was exacerbated and highlighted by the pandemic, but it was not caused by the pandemic. But yes, of course, women, I think the group that was most, let's say, impacted by the pandemic were working mothers, because on top of their workload, and it was probably even harder for working mothers who were entrepreneurs, because already your startup is like a baby. And then you've got kids at home who you need to help with their homeschooling. And homeschooling, we definitely, I mean, one thing we're proud of is how quickly the government sort of moved towards home learning. But we as a society to kind of suddenly I think we've as a society have always kind of outsourced our learning, our kids' education to teachers, and just said, well, the schools will take care of that. And all of a sudden there was no one there to take care of it. Mothers had to step up and really be there for their kids during their classes and quizzes and exams. And I mean, I'm not a mother, but I've seen it with my team members who, they've got kids, and every time there was a quiz or an exam, and especially as Sheikh Lubna said, when there are multiple kids, it becomes even harder. You're running between different laptops and different screens and trying to manage their different learning. So I think that's definitely one of the biggest challenges that women faced. The other challenge, which I don't like to generalize because this is not true for all women, but I would say in general, a lot of the women entrepreneurs were in sectors that were a little bit more impacted by the pandemic. So sectors like, let's say, arts or culture or retail or hospitality, these were sectors that were significantly impacted by the pandemic. And that was a bit of a challenge, but I have no numbers to necessarily give you.
But any initiatives were announced to support women in both cases or not?
Yeah, there were. So those are the challenges. I think, in terms of the challenges, that I'd say that there were three challenges in terms of women. One was obviously having to handle both home schooling plus work. One was if they were in industries that were specifically impacted by the pandemic, it made it a little bit more difficult. And the other, which is, we know that when it comes to VC, when it comes to venture capital, the number of women receiving funding from venture capitalists is significantly lower than men. So I think the number around the world is around 3% of venture capital funding actually goes to women, but that was made worse by the pandemic. So while overall there was more venture capital to startups, less was going to women. And the reason being that women didn't have naturally, obviously when we're now working from home, you don't have the opportunity to go and network and to meet people. And as an investor, you just go and invest in whoever you know, whoever your bias is towards the people that you know and that are already part of your network and that you're comfortable with. And so I think that did impact women a little bit as well in terms of receiving funding overall. And I'm talking about global trends here. I don't have a specific regional number, but this is, again, hearsay based on what I've seen. On the contrary, in terms of opportunities, I mean, it's ironic because we talk about the challenges and how the pandemic impacted women. And then when you ask anybody which world leaders handled the pandemic best, the names are Jacinda Ardern, Angela Merkel, like suddenly it's all the women leaders who are quoted as, those who really brought about the systemic change that was needed to handle a pandemic. And I think that, that says a lot about the value that women bring to the table. But yes, I mean, to answer your question, where did programs come up in response to that? Yes, we've seen more funds come up that are investing with a gender lens. So they're specifically investing in startups that are either founded or co-founded by women. We're seeing more mentorship programs that are focused on women. There's a program actually that was announced also during the pandemic, which is not necessarily startup related, but just to show you, just to give you an example, I believe it's called Aurora 50. It was started by Her Highness Sheikh Hisham bin Nahyan to basically get more women in board seats. And it went, yes, they selected women and they provide them with the training, but they also provide them with the actual board seat and the opportunity to actually spend a year on the board of a company. So those sorts of programs came up targeting women, and I think that made a big difference. And again, what is true across the board, and Sheikh Hind said this: with every challenge there is an opportunity, and I think we saw that with women. And again, these are stories that I'm telling you just based on what I've seen. We had for example, one of our entrepreneurs, a woman. She basically did 3D printing for schools, so teaching 3D printing to students in schools. Obviously, when schools shut down, that business disappeared, she pivoted to then using 3D printing to print masks, the face shields, rather, as part of the pandemic.
That's really impressive, to be frank with you,
yes.
Ms. Najla. But I wonder why we don't have numbers, and maybe you can briefly touch this point if you know the reasons behind that. And
I don't think there. I don't. Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I had actually when I was actually doing some research on this. I thought I can't seem to find numbers on women specifically in the region. Globally, yes, there are reports, and I'm sure you mentioned women are disproportionately affected by the pandemic. But is that true for the region or not? That's what we need to do the research on. I think it's just a matter of kind of someone being willing to take the lead on that, and I think that's a commitment that we can make as Shura, is that we want to now. One of the things that I told the team was we really need to publish some research on women entrepreneurs, how they were impacted by the pandemic, and maybe Sheikha Hind, this is something we can do in partnership with the Businesswomen Council as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to hear from Sheikha Lubna. Why do we lack numbers in the region?
I think you have to ask the region.
We're part of the region.
I can focus on numbers here. And I think within the Emirates, I give credit to all the different Emirates and their work in addition to the federal government. UAE had always learned by numbers and enhanced itself by numbers. So the Competitive Council, for example, looks at the numbers to see where we actually score less, and we start to improve ourselves. And unless you have to have the metrics, you have to have the line to say I want to reach that, and then when you reach it, you move that forward. But if you don't, if you just go ahead and do the business and think, okay, people will come along, it doesn't work unless you have a system. UAE had this as a federal government to start with, but almost in every Emirates right now, you see that. I wanted to comment on Najla's point about the business with retailing. It's quite interesting. Most of the businesses on Instagram are actually run by women now, and they're just smart. They in terms of everything, very creative.
Exactly.
And this is something I want to put forward for both Sheikha Hind and Najla. What I found out when you order anything, post-sales, the minute you say, okay, that's done, once you mobilize it through delivery, it goes south. Somehow the companies who actually put themselves front as delivery companies do not do well. They'll call you out of the blue, not home.
And then say send the location.
And no understanding. And I think that is the area that needs to be improved somehow. Because usually when you have retailing, it's A to Z. It doesn't just go beyond the selling itself. The financial systems, I also find out that a lot of the young starters do not opt for online payment. And that makes it difficult because sometimes you may have a product, and if you're not home, they'll call you up and say, okay, well, you can drop it by the gate, or you can open the gate, put it there. But if it's cash on delivery, you're stuck.
Exactly.
So payment gateways are critical, and they have to, maybe sometimes I think it's the charges. They think that's too much or something, but these retailing business need to get into them. That's what makes one company better than the other. And the delivery, by the way.
So we have lots of ideas now. Maybe your team, Ms. Najla, has to work on.
I'm going to go back and... I think Sheikha Hind touched upon this. You were saying that you were training them on how to use payment gateways as well. And I think a lot of it is awareness and mentoring. And sometimes it's just fear because they don't know how to do it. And I think if we can be there and handhold them through the process, I think we can definitely...
linking them with Tawsil, or if they want to showcase their product through different platforms, for example, Noon, and they don't take a lot of percentage from them. Because putting their products in a platform, they're gonna lose their percentage. So what we're trying to do, that from Tawsil or Noon, to try to support them as beginners or startups, that not to take a very high percentage from them. So this is what we're trying to do. And
my-
Sheikha Lubna, don't worry.
we're
if I
trying.
may
They're working
add,
on it.
yeah, no, I'm sure, but it's a highlight that you see that makes it inconvenient. I mean, this whole thing is about convenience and comfort.
Yes,
But it's quite interesting. I found something that was something I've never seen before, and that's cross marketing between women. When you go on one of the Instagrams where they're promoting, sometimes you think, wait a minute, this is not their product. And then they would refer you to another company or saying, you know, you should also look into this. And they start promoting others. So this cross promotion is actually quite clever, which was not there. I've never seen that before. And I think that's also creativity of the women themselves, where they support each other.
I think supporting each other, letting them grow. This is what I believe. And even the pandemic bring community together. I hope it's going to continue even after the pandemic, that they stay connected and supporting each other. I just wanted to highlight the research and number with Najla. We have have the same problem facing. Like, for example, we were looking for the agriculture. So we didn't have the numbers, to be honest. So we're working on it, and I believe it's going to be good to collaborate, having a good data or a number in the business.
Inshallah. So there you go, Maysoon. We're making a commitment on the actual session to work together to, inshallah, the next time we meet next year, we'll have some data to present on. Yeah.
We'll keep an eye on you, but data is very important. And here I can ask Dr. Manahel regarding that. If you want to make a research to work on one, you need numbers.
Of course.
Don't you?
Of course.
So how do you manage?
Well, because I have a consultancy firm, and we have our own actually network of data resource actually. And then because of my mathematical say experience, then I try to make sense of these numbers. And to be honest with you, it's a big challenge to create 100% accuracy ratio upon, especially the GCC market. I mean, yes, the government of UAE, mashallah, at a federal level, to their entities, they have a very solid data and and information. But if I talk about the market, and talking about somebody who doesn't know the market and they want to come here and they want to study the market very well, it's quite challenging to get the data that will give them accuracy ratio to
But now we have promises, so next year we'll keep an eye.
Looking forward.
Najla and Sheikha Hind. Okay, we still have only 5 minutes to end this session. Interesting, very interesting and informative session. I'll ask a question for all my panelists, for all of you, and you have 1 minute each. We need to talk about the key lessons learned from the pandemic, which you will carry forward in 2021. Sheikha Lubna.
Okay, I think looking back in history, we have gone through crises. This is not the first time. This is very peculiar because it touches on health and on people directly. It is something unknown to us. So every time, like we had in 2008 financial crises, and every time there was lessons learned. What happened this time is, as Dr. Thabit said, it's the acceleration of things. The reaction, the cause, and the effect was much faster. So for us, I would believe that being quite open to changes and thinking about looking for resources, for solutions, for creativity is the way to look, and not to lose anxiety or lose focus because of anxiety or fear, because everybody will be there to support.
Sheikha Hind.
As Sheikha Lubna said, not to lose hope, creativity. So I believe the pandemic, as I said, brought community together and women supported each other. So I think I would like this to continue, to support each other and keep creative and have hope. That's all.
Dr. Manahel?
Yeah, I've learned that being negative is the most positive news you can get in this kind of times. Actually, adaptations, like location. That was in the past, but now adaptation. I second Sheikh Lubna when she said, never lose hope. This is what I've learned.
Excellent. Ms. Najla?
I would agree with all my fellow panelists. The first thing we did was, it's easy for us to tell others to adapt, but we also need to reflect on our own selves and see how we need to adapt. And one of the first things we did is actually change our entire program. We've been running an accelerator program for the last 5 years. We've now changed the model through which we are supporting startups. We've announced the Sharjah Startup Studio, which is a much more hands-on approach, where it's instead of just putting entrepreneurs through workshops for 3 months, we actually roll up our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and work alongside them to validate their assumptions, to help build their product, and to really help get them into the market. And a lot of those learnings came because of the pandemic. So again, reflecting that obligation to adapt on ourselves is definitely a key lesson. And in addition to hope, I would also say gratitude and just keeping things in perspective, because obviously the pandemic is a reminder of how fragile life can be.
Unfortunately, we have reached the end of the opening session. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for your input. It was very informative, eye-opening for me. I need also to start to reformulate myself in order to adapt to the new transformation. For all of you who are watching, the session ended, but there are lots of topics to be covered in other sessions. So stay tuned, and thank you very much, and hope to see you next year. You promised an initiative that we'll wait for, and we'll keep an eye on you, Sheikha Hind and Sheikha Najla. Thank you, Sheikha Lubna and Dr. Manahel, and wish you the best of luck and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.